The massive academy stood like a silent mountain on the edge of the galactic capital. Its black towers rose above the clouds, and its silver gates shined under the artificial suns. For many young recruits of the Empire, this was the first time they had ever seen such a place. Some looked around with wide eyes, others whispered nervously, their voices echoing in the long halls. This was no ordinary school, no ordinary training ground. This was the place where the galaxy's soldiers were shaped. Among the newest recruits was a group of young aliens from different worlds, scaled bodies, feathered wings, bright eyes that glowed in the dim light. They were full of energy, full of pride, ready to learn how to serve the great empire. But none of them understood why the instructors had ordered them into a cold, dark chamber instead of the shining training halls. The room was huge, circular, and filled with giant screens that curved around them. The air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves carried some old memory. A few recruits laughed to hide their unease. One whispered to his friend, "Maybe this is just an old history lesson," another answered. "History? Why so dark? Why does it feel like we are entering a tomb?" Before anyone could say more, the heavy doors closed with a loud echo. The lights dimmed, and only the glowing screens lit the chamber. Then the instructor entered, his boots striking the floor with sharp sound. He was tall, scarred, his face half hidden under the shadow of a metallic mask. His eyes were like cold glass, watching the recruits without a trace of warmth when he spoke. His voice carried across the hall like the sound of steel. "Welcome, cadets, today. You will witness the most dangerous archives ever recorded in the galaxy." The recruits fell silent. Dangerous archives? What could be so dangerous about old records? The instructor paused, letting the tension grow. "You have been called here to learn about a species that every soldier must know, a species that every commander fears, a species that history itself has marked as a warning." He stepped aside, pointing to the giant screens. "Today, you will see the archives of humanity." The recruits exchanged confused glances. Some had heard the word human before, but only in rumors. Others had never heard it at all. One recruit raised his scaled hand and asked, "Are they another empire? Another rival race?" The instructor's eyes glowed cold under his mask. "No, cadet, they are not an empire, they are not many, but they are something more dangerous than numbers. More dangerous than empires." The room grew colder. The recruits felt the weight of his words press against them. Why did the instructor, a battle-scarred veteran, sound so grim? Why did he speak of this species as if speaking of a curse? Then the screens flickered and the first images appeared. The recruits leaned forward, some with curiosity, others with forced bravery. What they saw was strange and unsettling. Primitive humans with no armor, no ships, no technology, just bodies covered in crude cloth, faces hard, eyes burning with fire. They held weapons made of stone and wood, and yet they fought with a fury that made the recruits shift in discomfort. On the screen, humans clashed in brutal battles. They screamed as they charged, they roared as they struck. Even when cut down, they crawled forward, trying to fight with teeth and nails. The aliens could not understand it. Why would a being with no protection, no strength compared to larger predators, fight so hard? Why would they not flee, not hide, not surrender? One recruit laughed nervously. "They look primitive, weak, just savages fighting with sticks." But the instructor did not smile. His voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "Do not mistake weakness for harmlessness. These creatures have been fighting since their first breath. They fought nature, they fought beasts, they fought each other. They never stopped." The laughter died. The recruits turned back to the screen, unease spreading in their stomachs. The humans on the archive fought until blood covered the ground, and when the battle ended, they buried their dead, healed their wounded, and prepared for the next fight. There was no peace, no long silence, only the endless rhythm of conflict. The instructor walked slowly across the room, his boots echoing. "Understand this, cadets. Humanity is not strong because of their weapons. They are strong because they refuse to die. They are strong because they never give up, even when their world burns. They rise again." He let the words sink in. The recruits felt a chill run through their bones. The screens darkened, the first part of the archive ending. The room was silent, only the low hum of the machines filling the air. One recruit whispered softly, almost to himself, Why are we being shown this?" The instructor turned his gaze on the young alien, his voice deep and heavy. "Because, cadet, one day you may face them, and if you do, you must understand. Fear alone will not save you. The recruits swallowed hard. For the first time since entering the academy, their pride began to crack. What lay ahead in the archives? If this was only the beginning, how much worse could it become? The chamber doors locked behind them, and the lesson was far from over. The screens flickered once more, and the recruits leaned forward with tense curiosity. They expected to see more primitive battles. Tribes with sticks and stones, savage but simple. But what appeared was something different, something that felt darker. The instructor's cold voice filled the chamber again. Now you will see how humanity grew. You will see what happens when their hands build more than fire and stone. The image sharpened. The recruits saw men and women wearing metal armor, carrying blades that glowed under the sunlight. Lines of soldiers marched together, shields raised, their boots shaking the earth. A horn sounded, and suddenly the field erupted into chaos. Thousands of humans clashed, steel striking steel, screams filling the sky. The recruits could not look away. They had studied war before, but never like this. Never with such madness and such unity. One recruit with feathered wings muttered, "They fight each other like enemies from another world. Why do they destroy their own kind?" The instructor turned his cold gaze toward him. Because they cannot stop. Conflict is in their blood. They fight not only to defend, but because they refuse to kneel. Even to each other, on the screens, soldiers fell, blood covering the soil. Yet the lines did not break. When one soldier died, another stepped forward. When a leader fell, another took his place. The recruits felt their stomachs twist. To them, war was a last resort, a strategy of survival, but for humans, war looked like life itself. They fought with faces twisted in rage, but also with a strange fire in their eyes. A fire that looked almost like joy. The archive shifted. Now the recruits saw wooden ships with sails crossing stormy seas. Men with beards roared as they swung axes. Flames lighting the dark waters, villages burned, people screamed. Yet the humans pushed forward without fear. They sang while they fought, their voices mixing with the clash of steel. The recruits shivered, some whispering, "They sing, while killing?" The instructor nodded grimly. Yes, to them war is not only pain, it is pride, it is glory. It is survival. The recruits' eyes widened as the archive moved again. Now humans carried black powder weapons, muskets that thundered with smoke and fire. Rows of soldiers fired into each other, bodies falling by the hundreds. Yet they did not run, they did not scream. They simply reloaded and fired again. The discipline, the courage, the madness of it all made the recruits' throats dry. One alien whispered, "They are not afraid of death," the instructor answered. "No, they are not. Death is only another battlefield to them." The room grew heavier. Some recruits looked away, unable to watch more blood spill. But the instructor's voice forced them to face the truth. "This is what makes them dangerous. You see primitive weapons. But I see the beginning of endless war. No matter the age, no matter the tools, they will always find a way to fight harder, stronger, longer." The screens now showed images of burning castles, torn banners, and soldiers shouting victory cries over ruined fields. The humans seemed to celebrate not only life, but destruction itself. The recruits felt a strange fear, not of the weapons, but of the humans' will, even in loss. Their eyes never dimmed. Even in defeat, their voices still rose. One young reptilian recruit whispered to himself, "If they fight like this against their own kind, how would they fight against us?" The question spread silently across the room, settling in every recruit's heart. None dared to speak the answer. But the fear in their eyes spoke louder than words. The instructor allowed the silence to stretch. He wanted them to feel it. Then his voice cut through like thunder. "Do not believe this is only their past. Humanity does not leave war behind. Humanity carries it forward. They shape it, sharpen it, make it larger. And every time you think they are finished, they rise again, stronger." The recruits shifted uneasily, their wings scales, and claws trembling with the weight of his words. The instructor pointed at the dark screen as it faded to black. "This is only the first chapter. This is only the beginning of their history. And already you feel unease. Already you sense the terror of what they are." The lights in the chamber remained dim. The recruits whispered to each other nervously. Some tried to laugh, but their voices cracked. Some tried to stand tall, but their shoulders bent under invisible weight. The name humanity now carried a shadow, a weight none of them expected. The instructor walked slowly to the center of the chamber, his metallic mask reflecting the dim glow. "You will learn more, you will see more. You will feel what every commander in the galaxy has felt when facing them: fear, confusion, and the terrible question: how do you defeat those who refuse to fall? The recruits stared at him with wide eyes. The silence in the room felt like a living thing crawling into their bones. One recruit, voice shaking, whispered, "Instructor, is this why the galaxy fears them?" The masked figure stopped, his voice low, cold, and certain. "Yes, cadet, this is why, and this is only the first archive." The doors locked again, the chamber sealing them in for the next lesson. The recruits knew now there was no escape. They had seen enough to feel fear, but not enough to understand the full truth. And deep inside, a question burned stronger than ever. If this was the beginning, what horrors waited in the next archive? The chamber's air grew heavier as the screens lit up again. This time the images were sharper, louder, filled with smoke and fire. The recruits leaned forward, their bodies tense, their eyes unblinking. The instructor's voice cut through the silence, deep and steady. "Now you will see the age when humanity built machines for war. This is when their fury became metal, when their rage turned into engines." The first scene showed a battlefield of mud. Humans in strange uniforms marched through smoke, their faces covered with cloth, their hands holding metal rifles. The air thundered with explosions, shells falling from the sky, tearing the earth apart. Massive machines rolled across the ground, iron beasts with cannons that spat fire. The recruits gasped. They had seen tanks before, but never used with such madness. Never driven by soldiers who ran toward the enemy even as bombs rained around them. One winged recruit covered his beak with trembling hands. They walk into the fire as if death does not exist. The instructor's eyes were hard as steel. "Yes, cadet, they do not wait for safety. They move forward even when forward means death." The screens showed trenches filled with mud, rats and blood. Humans huddled inside, then climbed out when the signal was given. They charged across open ground while machine guns cut them down like falling leaves. But still more followed, wave after wave. The recruits shivered, unable to understand why keep running into certain death. "Why not stop? Why not retreat?" A reptilian recruit whispered, his voice shaking. "This is not war. This is slaughter." The instructor turned sharply, his voice cold. "No, cadet, this is humanity's strength. When others would break, they advance. When others would surrender, they fight harder." The scene shifted again. The recruits now saw skies filled with roaring planes. Dogfights twisted through the clouds. Trails of smoke and fire marking each fall. Bombs dropped on cities below, turning stone into dust, fire consuming everything. The recruits' eyes widened as children ran for cover, as mothers clutched infants under the thunder of destruction. And still the humans fought back. Factories burned, yet weapons rolled out of the rubble. Cities shattered, yet soldiers marched again. One young alien shook his head, whispering, "How can they fight when their homes are gone? When their families are lost?" The instructor's answer was sharp. "Because loss does not weaken them. It feeds them. It sharpens their rage. They turn pain into fuel, grief into fire. That is why they cannot be broken." The next image showed humans cheering as they pushed massive machines across bridges. Cannons roared, tanks advanced, soldiers carried wounded comrades without slowing their march. The recruits saw faces caked in mud, eyes red with exhaustion, yet still burning with defiance. It was not glory, it was not pride. It was something deeper, survival written into their very bones. The screens flashed again. Now they saw the sea. Giant warships clashed, their guns thundering across the waves. Submarines lurked below, striking unseen. The water burned with fire and oil as humans fought on every front. Land, sky, and sea, the recruits whispered among themselves. No other race fights on every surface at once, not with such fury, not with such will. The instructor stepped forward, his shadow stretching across the chamber. "Do you begin to understand? Machines gave humanity reach, but it was not the machines that made them terrifying. It was the will behind the machines, a will that refused to stop even when the world itself burned." The recruits felt sweat forming on their skin. Some wrapped their arms around themselves as if trying to hide from the truth. Others stared with wide, trembling eyes, their confidence fading. The name human no longer sounded weak, no longer sounded primitive. It sounded like thunder waiting to strike. The archive shifted again. This time it showed ruined cities. Entire landscapes turned to rubble. But in the ruins, humans dug, built, and fought again, even as smoke choked the sky. Even as ash covered the earth, they refused to fall. The recruits' hearts pounded with fear. They realized now that humanity's true power was not its weapons. It was the refusal to stay down. One cadet whispered to his neighbor, "If this is only the age of machines, what comes next?" The question spread through the room, a shadow heavier than the images on the screen. The instructor let the silence grow, then answered in a voice that echoed like iron. "What comes next is worse, because when they learned the machine was not enough, they reached for the power of the stars themselves." The recruits froze. Some lowered their heads, others clenched their fists. If this was not the worst, if worse still waited, then what kind of monsters were these humans? The instructor's mask reflected the dim light as he spoke one final time. "Remember this, cadets, the age of machines was not their peak. It was only their preparation. The true terror of humanity was still to come." The screens faded to black. The chamber shook slightly as the heavy lock sealed the doors again. The recruits sat in silence, unable to breathe easy. They had seen armies, tanks, planes, and fire. But what chilled them most was not the weapons. It was the human spirit that kept rising through the smoke. And deep in their hearts a single thought echoed. If this was only a chapter, how would the galaxy ever survive the next one? The chamber's silence deepened as the screens flickered to life once more. The recruits sat stiff, their hearts pounding, their minds still shaken from the machines of war. They thought they had seen the worst. Endless trenches, burning skies, seas filled with fire. But the instructor's voice returned, colder than ever. "You believe machines are the height of their fury? You are wrong. Humanity's hunger for war did not end there. When machines were not enough, they reached for power beyond reason." The image on the screens changed. A bright flash exploded across the field of vision. It was not a cannon, not a bomb. Not fire as the recruits understood it. It was a sun, a small sun, burning the world beneath it. The recruits cried out, covering their eyes with wings, scales and claws. One shouted, "That is not a weapon. That is madness." The instructor's voice cut through their panic. "This is the nuclear age, cadets. Humanity learned how to break the atom, to split the very heart of matter. And instead of fearing it, they made it into a weapon." The recruits blinked at the screens as cities turned into deserts of ash. Buildings crumbled like sand. Shadows of people burned into walls. Mushroom clouds rose high into the heavens, choking the skies. The ground itself seemed to scream as the fire swallowed it whole. No one in the chamber spoke. Even the bravest cadets trembled, their voices trapped in their throats. Finally, one whispered, "Why would they do this? Why destroy their own world?" The instructor's reply was like iron striking stone. "Because surrender is death to them, and if they must burn the world to win, they will burn it without hesitation." The archive showed soldiers walking through ruins, their uniforms torn, their bodies sick from radiation. Yet they marched, they fought. They raised torn flags over broken ground. Children cried in the rubble. Mothers clutched their babies under skies of ash, but the humans did not stop. Factories rose again, armies gathered again. Even after cities vanished, their will remained. A winged recruit buried his face in his hands, his feathers shaking. "This is not war. This is the end of worlds." The instructor turned his cold gaze on him. "Exactly, cadet. Humanity is the only species known to master a weapon that could end all life. And instead of fear, they called it power." The screens shifted, showing tests of nuclear fire in deserts and oceans. Blinding light swallowed islands, waves rose like mountains, ships cracked like toys. The recruits gasped, their minds breaking under the scale. One reptilian recruit whispered, They practice this destruction? They test it?" "Yes," the instructor said, his voice steady. "Because to them, destruction is only another tool. They sharpen it, measure it, and prepare it for war." The chamber felt colder now, as if the images drained the warmth from the room. Some recruits hugged themselves. Others tried to hide their fear, but none could look away. The screens kept showing more. Endless fireballs. Endless cities erased in a blink, and then came the silence. The silence after the storm. Fields of nothing. Worlds turned into graveyards of dust. One cadet finally broke, shouting, "This is insanity. This is not survival. This is suicide." The instructor's mask turned toward him, voice low and final. "And yet they survived. They always survive. Even when they poison their skies and scorch their soil, humanity endures." The recruits fell silent again. Their panic shifted into something heavier. Dread. If humans could survive their own destruction, then how could anyone else hope to defeat them? The archive shifted once more, showing leaders sitting at long tables. They signed papers, shook hands, and spoke of peace. The recruits sighed in relief for a moment. Perhaps the nightmare was ending. Perhaps even humans could finally choose calm. But then the instructor's voice returned. Do not be fooled, even in peace they prepare for war. Even when they swear never to use these weapons again, they keep them close, they keep the fire ready, waiting for the day they need it. The screens showed hidden silos filled with nuclear warheads, submarines carrying missiles under dark oceans, bombers ready to fly at a single command. The recruits' eyes widened as they realized the humans had not abandoned their weapons. They had multiplied them, spread them, hidden them like seeds of fire across the world. One alien muttered with trembling voice, "No empire, no species, keeps weapons they promise not to use." The instructor's answer was cold. Humans do because promises mean nothing when survival is at stake. And for them, survival is everything. The archive ended with one last image. A human city, rebuilt from ashes, children running across the streets, laughter echoing. But behind the laughter, hidden in silos, in submarines, in shadows, the fire still waited. The recruits felt the chill of it, the strange, terrifying truth. Humanity did not fear its own extinction. Humanity planned for it, lived with it, and carried it into the future. The screens darkened, leaving only the echo of silence. The instructor stepped forward, his metallic mask reflecting the last faint glow. Understand this, cadets. The nuclear era was not the end of humanity. It was proof that even when they build weapons to destroy everything, they do not fall, they rise, they adapt, they endure, and that is what makes them truly terrifying. The chamber's doors sealed again with a heavy thud. The recruits sat frozen, hearts racing, minds reeling. If this was not the end of humanity, if this was only another chapter, then what in the galaxy could possibly come next? The chamber vibrated faintly as the next archive began. The recruits straightened, their faces pale, their bodies tense. They had seen humans in mud, in trenches, in fire. They had watched them split the atom and burn their own skies. But nothing could prepare them for what came next. The instructor's voice, colder than ever, filled the dark hall. Now, cadets, you will see what happens when humanity leaves its world behind. When their fury is given the stars themselves, the screens came alive. A vast black sky filled with stars stretched before the recruits, and then ships, human ships, not graceful like the designs of other species, but brutal, angular, made for war. Engines flared, weapons glowed. Fleets moved like storms across the void. The recruits gasped. Some clutching the edges of their seats, one whispered, They are not meant to be in space, they should not be here." But the evidence was clear. Humanity had claimed the void. The first scene showed a battle above a burning planet. Human warships clashed with alien cruisers, beams of energy slicing through the darkness. Explosions lit up the sky like miniature suns. Boarding craft slammed into enemy vessels. Human soldiers flooding out. They fought not with hesitation, but with the same ferocity they had shown with sticks, swords, and tanks. The recruits could see their faces through helmet glass, eyes burning, jaws clenched, unstoppable. A winged recruit muttered with horror, "Even against enemies stronger than them they charge." The instructor's mask gleamed in the flickering light. "Yes, cadet. Humanity does not measure strength by numbers. They fight until the stronger falls." The archive shifted again. Now it showed the ruins of a conquered world. Alien cities once proud now lay shattered, their towers burning, their skies filled with smoke. Yet in the streets human soldiers stood guard, calm, watchful, their weapons ready. The recruits noticed something strange. Even after victory, the humans did not relax, they rebuilt, fortified, prepared for the next war as if peace itself could not be trusted. The instructor's voice was low and sharp. This is their nature. To fight one war is only to prepare for the next. To win one world is only to set their eyes on another. One reptilian cadet whispered, "But why do they keep fighting? Why never stop?" The instructor turned his gaze upon him. Because they see the universe as they saw their first forests, their first caves full of threats, full of predators, and their answer is always the same. Fight. Fight until nothing can threaten them again. The screens lit up with another battle. This time, fleets larger than the recruits had ever imagined. Human warships charging against a species twice their size. Planets shook as orbital strikes turned continents into fire. The recruits' jaws dropped. Some could barely breathe as they watched humans storm enemy capital ships with fire in their eyes. It was madness, it was impossible, and yet, the humans kept winning. The archive did not stop. It showed campaign after campaign, worlds falling, enemies retreating, and always the humans pressing forward. Even when their ships cracked, even when fleets burned. Survivors rammed their vessels into enemy lines. Sacrifice was not lost to them, it was a weapon. The recruits shifted uncomfortably. Their hearts pounding, they had been trained to fight. Yes, but never to give everything. Never to embrace death so willingly. The instructor's voice was heavy as stone. Understand this, cadets. Humanity does not fear destruction. They wield it. They turn even defeat into victory. When one human falls, another rises. When one fleet burns, another is built from the ashes. The recruits swallowed hard. They had never imagined such a species. To them, war was strategy, survival, sometimes honor. But for humans, war seemed like destiny. The archive shifted once more. Now it showed not victory, but aftermath, worlds scarred, cities in ruins, graves stretching across alien soil, and yet in every ruin the humans remained. They rebuilt bases, planted flags, raised children under shattered skies. The recruits could hardly believe it. Where others would abandon a broken world, humans made it theirs. They did not just win wars, they claimed survival itself. One young cadet whispered in fear, "If they fight like this, how does anyone stop them?" The instructor turned slowly, his metallic mask gleaming in the dim light. "You do not stop them, cadet, you survive them. If you are lucky." The screens faded to black, but the silence in the chamber was louder than the explosions they had just witnessed. The recruits sat frozen, their bodies trembling, their eyes wide with dread. They had seen humans climb from mud to machines, from fire to stars, and now they knew nothing. Not even the galaxy itself would ever tame them. The instructor's final words echoed like a grave warning. Interstellar war did not make them monsters. It revealed what they always were. Humanity is not content with survival. They reach for more, always more, and when the stars themselves stand against them, they will burn the stars to ash. The chamber doors locked once again, sealing the recruits in with their fear. No one dared to speak because deep in their hearts, every cadet now understood the truth. The galaxy's nightmare had already begun, and its name was humanity. The chamber was silent, but the recruits' minds were loud. They still saw fleets burning, planets crumbling, and humans fighting without fear. Some had started to sweat. Others gripped their seats as if holding onto the last piece of safety. Then the screens lit up again, not with battle, but with something heavier, something quieter. The instructor's voice came low and cold. "You have seen how they fight, now you will see the cost. And you will see why that cost never stops them." The first images showed endless rows of graves. White stones stretching across fields as far as the eye could see. Flags fluttered in the wind, some torn, some burned. Children walked among them, leaving flowers, their small hands touching cold stone. The recruits felt a heavy pressure in their hearts. This was not war. This was the shadow left behind. One winged cadet whispered softly, "So many dead. Why do they not stop after this?" The instructor's mask turned slightly, his voice sharp. "Because to them every death is fuel. Every grave is a reason to rise again." The screen shifted. Now they showed cities reduced to rubble. Broken towers stood like bones, streets filled with dust, fire glowing in the ruins, but within the rubble, humans moved. They carried bricks. They pulled survivors from wreckage. They rebuilt stone by stone. Even as smoke still rose from the ground, the recruits could hardly believe it. Other species would abandon such ruins, would flee to safer worlds, but humans stayed. Humans rebuilt on top of ashes, a reptilian cadet muttered. "They do not know how to quit." The instructor nodded slowly. "You are beginning to understand. To them, the cost of war is not the end. It is the beginning of the next fight." The archive played again. Now it showed soldiers scarred and broken, some with missing limbs, some blinded, others carrying wounds that would never heal. But none sat idle. They trained new recruits. They marched with metal limbs. They taught children to survive. The recruits shivered and even wounded. Even shattered, the humans refused to fade. The instructor's voice grew heavier. Where others see weakness, they find strength. Where others see an ending, they see another path forward. That is why they are feared. The screens showed more. Mothers crying over graves, fathers holding the hands of children in ruins. But even as they cried, even as their voices broke, they stood again. They carried weapons. They raised flags. They marched once more. The recruits' hearts twisted. It was not the weapons that terrified them now. It was this, the refusal to stay broken. One young alien whispered, "But don't they ever tire? Don't they ever refuse to fight again?" The instructor's gaze was cold. His answer without mercy. "No, they may despair, but they will still fight. They may weep, but they will rise. For them, pain is not the end. It is the reminder of what must be done." The archive shifted again. Now it showed whole generations born in the shadow of war. Children playing with burned metal scraps, turning ruins into games. They laughed under skies filled with smoke. They grew strong in places where life should have ended. The recruits could hardly breathe. This was not survival. It was defiance. The instructor stepped forward, his boots echoing. "This is the cost of war for humanity. Endless graves, endless ruins, endless pain. But it does not stop them. If anything, it forges them harder. Every scar is a weapon, every loss a reason. And so they become stronger with every war." The screens showed veterans returning home, greeted with tears and songs, but even then, they carried the weight of battle in their eyes. They built families, they built homes, yet always prepared, because they knew the next war would come, and they would answer it. The recruits sat frozen. Some wanted to deny it, to shout that no species could live like this. But the proof was before them, undeniable. Humans did not run from the cost of war. They carried it, they wore it like armor. One feathered cadet finally asked in a trembling voice, "Instructor, if every war only makes them stronger, if every cost only forges them harder, then how does anyone defeat them?" The instructor's reply was a whisper, but it carried like thunder. "You do not. You may fight them, you may slow them, but defeat? No, defeat is not something humanity accepts." The screens faded to black. The chamber felt colder than before, as if the silence was made of ice. The recruits looked at each other with pale faces. They had come to learn, to train, to prepare, but now they wondered if any preparation could be enough. The instructor's final words rang like the toll of a bell. "The cost of war for humanity is endless, but it is also their greatest weapon. They will drown in blood, yet stand. They will bury generations, yet rise, and when you face them, remember this, you are not fighting an army. You are fighting a species that refuses to end." The doors sealed once again. The recruits bowed their heads, fear heavy in their eyes, because they finally understood. The true terror of humanity was not their weapons, not their numbers. It was their unbreakable will, forged in the cost of endless war. The recruits sat in silence, their eyes wide, their bodies tense. They had seen graves stretching to the horizon, ruins rebuilt into homes, and children laughing in ashes. They had learned that nothing could end humanity, not even their own weapons, but the instructor was not finished. His voice rose again, deep and unyielding. "You have seen their wars, their machines, their fire, and their scars. Now you will see the final lesson. You will see what drives them, what gives them the strength to fight when all hope is gone." The screens lit up. At first there was no battle, no fire, no destruction. Instead, a single figure stood tall upon a broken hill. A human commander, his uniform torn, his body bloodied, but his eyes burning like twin suns. Before him stood an army, tired, wounded, outnumbered. The recruits could feel the weight of the moment even through the screen. The man raised his voice, and though the words were ancient, the translation echoed through the chamber. "We fight because we must. We fight because if we do not, no one else will. We fight because to live free, we cannot kneel." The recruits shivered. It was not power that shook them, but the simplicity, the certainty. No promises of glory, no rewards of riches. Only the demand to stand and fight, and the humans answered. With broken weapons, with broken bodies, they roared and charged. The recruits watched in stunned silence, their hearts racing. It was not madness, and when it was something worse, it was belief. The instructor's voice was sharp as steel. "This is the final lesson, cadets. Humanity does not fight only with weapons. They fight with spirit, with belief, with something no empire can erase." The archive shifted. Now it showed countless other leaders, countless other moments. Some shouted from starships, some stood on rubble, some whispered to soldiers in trenches, but all spoke the same truth. Fight, endure, rise. The recruits felt the words sink deep into their bones. This was why humanity could never be broken. Not because of machines, not because of numbers, but because every single human carried the same fire. One reptilian cadet whispered, "It is like their spirit itself is a weapon." The instructor turned his mask toward him. "Yes, and it is a weapon no one has ever defeated." The screens now showed a battle where humans were surrounded. Hopelessly outnumbered, ships burned, soldiers fell. Yet their lines never broke. Even when commanders died, others stepped forward. Even when weapons shattered, they fought with blades, with fists, with teeth. The recruits' hands trembled. They realized that against such enemies, numbers meant nothing, strength meant nothing. Because humans refused to stop, the instructor walked slowly across the chamber, his boots echoing. This is what the galaxy fears. Not their bombs, not their ships, but this. Their refusal to bow, their refusal to end, their ability to rise again no matter how many times you crush them. The archive shifted again. This time it showed the faces of ordinary humans, farmers, workers, children. But in each face was the same fire. When attacked, they stood. When threatened, they resisted. Every one of them, soldier or not, carried the same weapon within. The recruits felt their stomachs twist. It meant there was no weakness, no place where humanity could be broken. One feathered cadet whispered shakily, "If all of them are like this, then how can anyone ever win against them?" The instructor stopped in the center of the chamber, his voice like thunder. "You do not win against humanity, you only survive them. And even survival is never certain." The screens darkened, but the silence was filled with echoes of voices. Roaring humans, shouting humans, voices that refused to fade. The recruits could still feel the fire of the words, still see the burning eyes of the commander on the hill. It haunted them more than the images of bombs or battles, because now they understood the truth. Weapons can be broken, but belief cannot. The instructor faced the recruits, his mask gleaming in the dim light. "This is the final lesson, cadets. If you ever face humanity, know this: you are not fighting flesh. You are not fighting ships, you are fighting will itself. And will does not die." The recruits sat frozen, their claws, wings, and tails trembling. They had come to learn war, to prepare for enemies. But now they saw that nothing could prepare them for this. The final lesson was not about strategy, it was about terror. The terror of facing an enemy who never accepts defeat. The chamber doors sealed with a heavy thud. The recruits lowered their heads, their pride shattered. Some whispered prayers, others sat in silence. But all of them knew one thing. If the galaxy ever faced humanity again, no training, no army, no empire would be enough.